But anyway, it's like 1 minute early, but to hell with it. We'll get started. So welcome to the Tuesday Talk. There are a couple of things I should probably start off with, actually. The first of which is that there's going to be another one of these on Friday, because it's BlizzCon on Friday. So I'm going to be doing a BlizzCon stream. That's going to be at the same time as this is. Now, I was caught out slightly. I completely failed to realise that daylight savings is a thing. So we've just had daylight saving. We've gone from British summertime back to GMT at the weekend. So I got an extra hour in bed. That was nice. But that doesn't apply to everyone. Not everyone uses daylight savings time, and not everyone does it at the same time, apparently, as Mahal said there. So, yeah, some people may have been fooling with the time. But, yeah, so we're sort of back on GMT now. But that's going to be 7 PM till 9 PM. So that should be just before they start their announcement and running for a little bit of discussion after they finish it as well. So that's this Friday. In terms of Halloween, I don't think they really do it. I mean, it's not a big thing in the UK, not like it is in America. And around here, this is now, hold on. Is this the second or the third Halloween I'll have done while I've been living here? I think the second. I didn't have anyone last year. I'm not expecting anyone this year, but I have laid out the landmines in case they do. So if you've heard a large explosion, it's either a firework, because something we do have in the UK is bonfire night on the 5th of November, where a lot of fireworks are used, and people tend to get the fireworks earlier on. When the ceremony starts UK time, I don't know when the ceremony starts exactly. I'd have to look that up again, but I think the World of Warcraft discussion is round about 7:30 UK time. Hence doing the stream at 7 o'clock. I think that's the way I arranged it. I have the schedule somewhere, but I can't find where now. So, yes, so let's get started then. So the first thing I thought we could have a little talk about, something Natroxide actually talked about on Twitter, which was quite interesting. Again, BlizzCon related. I'm just keep checking if he's actually about. He's occasionally in the stream. And that is, what if, for example, that with this announcement at BlizzCon, there were no more expansions, or at least not expansions in the normal way. Like, for example, because then someone else responded, well, you know, Blizzard get $50 to $60, whatever it is, for an expansion. They're not going to throw that away. Unless, of course, you come up with a model that makes you even more money. And, of course, what some games do, instead of, in other MMOs, in fact, instead of bringing out expansions like Blizzard do, they bring out DLCs instead. So it's smaller regular content for which you can charge a smaller amount, but because it's a smaller amount, maybe more people buy it. Yeah, sorry, links are deleted. Sorry. But I'm sure you can look it up. If you just look up BlizzCon schedule 2017, it should come up in your own time. Yes, I did see the thing about the pictures I was going to talk about, because I'm doing WoW Flash again in the middle of the week. Sorry, so I'm going to be. So I was noting down all the bits and pieces of that. Yes, at BlizzCon, there was a Lordaeron symbol in one of the rooms, and then the video disappeared. It's not necessarily for World of Warcraft, and even if it is, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a major theme within the next expansion or next piece of content. Or it could be something still for Legion. Who knows? It might be something to do with Hearthstone even. But it might be, because it was supposed to be one of the esports rooms, and you'd obviously think there's going to be a room set up for people to try the next content, like the new expansion. They do sometimes do that. So it might be interesting. There are advantages to not doing expansions in the normal way. Like, one thing that always comes with every expansion is, first of all, you have an increase in level cap. And then you have there's feels for this need where they have to shake up talent system and blah, 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 blah. So the problem with that is that your level cap keeps going up, and you have to keep starting your leveling up and all that lost. So with DLCs, you come up with a different leveling system. I don't think the current leveling system is really built for a game lasting as long as this has lasted. And it might well be if they intend it to last a bit more time. I mean, it was interesting in the recent Q&A when Ian Hazzikostas talked about, he described these legendary tokens that are now out, which, yes, happy Halloween, Mal. It's coming off very soon. I'm going to give it 5 more minutes and it's gone, because I'm sweating like, well, I'm not really sweating, it's just all the water vapor condensing on my face. So yeah, Ian Hazzikostas was talking about with the legendary tokens that you can get if you've got all your legendaries as future proofing. I mean, that just to me, I knew it would infuriate people more than delight them, and it has. There's no end of tales of people who've got all their legendaries. And think about the profile of someone who's got all their legendaries. They've got all their legendaries because they play the game a lot. Probably on one character. These sort of people, although they might, are unlikely to have lots of alts. So to get a token for an alt they don't even have, like you're getting a warlock token, it's like, oh great, thanks very much. I don't have a warlock. It's like, great. I mean, at least if it was a token you could turn in to a vendor and pick your own. Even if you didn't pick your own legendary, if you pick the class at least, then that would be something. But yeah, so Ian Hazzikostas used the phrase future-proofing, and I wondered if they were thinking about future-proofing the rest of WoW by actively identifying the sorts of things that are problematic with such a long-lived game and trying to basically abolish them. Because, I mean, what we also have to remember is the next expansion has been overseen by Ian Hazzikostas. Legion wasn't. He was made a senior developer, a very senior developer in the last expansion, partway through WoD, where he was made assistant games director. And now, at the start of Legion, he was made full game director. So the next expansion, although it will have started work before he was the game director, he will have overseen much of the work on it. So maybe he has come in and identified some things. You know how it is when you're in work. There's always things about things that you would change if you're in charge. Well, now he's in charge. I'm guessing there will be several things that he thought should change, that he may have changed there as well. Imagine if you made the tokens tradable. If it dropped in a raid, it's too much advantage, I suppose, in then getting them drop in a raid and not anyone else. So, I don't know. You say you need Jeff Kaplan back as lead dev director. Sometimes you need -way. Sometimes it works out it's a bit like football managers, isn't it? Sometimes the football manager does really well at the club, then they leave, someone else comes in, all goes to hell. And then they bring the other guy back, and then it still goes to hell because there's something, because times have changed and no one's able to really adapt or anything like that. Do I think they'll make survival and range spec again? I don't think they're going to make massive changes to any spec. I think obviously they're going to have to bring them into post artifact time, but I don't see them making any massive changes to any of them because they tend not to do that in consecutive expansions. They may not even really bring any new spells out. Even they might just make sure they better balance the ones that have got. Right, I'm taking this off now, by the way, because breathable my ass. Also, I want a drink in a minute. Actually, this may even be a worse Halloween mask, but never mind. So yeah, survival is bound to be still melee. I think I'd be certain of that. Apart from anything else, I think some people quite like the survival spec. You just don't see as much of it in raiding because there's too many melee already. If you've got a really strong range... If I had a strong range spec, if there was Shockadin was a thing, then I would be playing Shockadin in Tomb at least, probably more than I was Ret. So if you've got a strong range spec, then yeah, I don't think you wouldn't use your melee one. But I think the way survival works is actually supposed to be pretty good. And people that get into it really like it. Well, you can say you think that. I really don't think they will. Apart from anything else, if they do, it's one thing to make changes to something in an expansion. It's another thing to revert recent changes. When you revert recent changes, it's every time you revert a change, it's basically admitting that you got it wrong. If you do it a lot, then it's admitting you got a lot wrong. Like, for example, with Rets, Greater Blessing of Might, shocking idea. It was an absolutely dreadful idea from the start. As soon as they announced how it was intended to work, god awful. The only people saying anything good about it were the people who didn't understand how it worked. As soon as people knew how it worked, absolutely dreadful. They did revert that eventually. But we've still got Holy Shock. I suppose because Holy Shock is not a baseline ability, they could just ignore it. But they couldn't get rid of it during Legion because then they just lose face. I mean, when I say Shockadin, I mean as not just as something that can do damage. I mean as something that can actually be used as a DPS spec. Obviously, you can't do that for a Holy because they can heal. That would allow someone to switch between healing and DPS. That would be too powerful. Unless, of course, you're going to do it like Discipline Priest and have it as a half and half. You can do the job of half a healer, or you can do the job as a DPS, and you can like do both at once. That would be okay as well. Yes, I have heard that survival has a fairly high skill cap, that you need to know what you're doing, you need to practice it, a bit like Subtlety Rogue. But it can do very well when you have got someone who can do that. It's just, as I say, there's, you know, ranged is a much more attractive place to be than melee. As much as ranged might moan, you know, they've got it way easier than us. They just moan a lot. Especially hunters. Who wouldn't want to be a... I mean, Beastmaster Hunter, blimey. I mean, when I'm on my Beastmaster Hunter, I jump around just for fun. When I don't even need to move, I just move habitually because I can without losing any damage. A little bit different on the other ones. Our range moan. They think they get all the mechanics. Yeah, I think the abilities from the artifact, because the abilities from the artifact weapon, for those that have them, there are a small number of specs that just got a passive, a bit like Frost DK just got a passive effect, didn't they? But I think for the rest, those abilities are an important part of the overall rotation, so they'll have to keep them. So there's going to be an event, obviously, where we lose our artifact weapons. They're not just going to disappear or be made like max level 110, so that as soon as you get 111 you can't have them. There's some event going to happen. The event may or may not be a good one, but ultimately I think it's going to involve us in just absorbing that special ability as part of it. I think there'll be some nonsense like that. I think it'll just be consumed and we'll absorb some of the, you know, powers of it. Endgame progression of said weapons being incredible time sinks. How do you think the devs will address the players' individual specs being so out of balance next patch? They will hope to not have them out of balance. I think the problem I always think where the problem comes with balance is that you can try, if the class design team just try and balance them, they're balancing them for a particular thing. Now, if you don't actually talk to, say, the encounter design team, you can end up with a situation where in raids some specs do really, really well and some don't. Even though if you take out the context of individual encounters, all the specs look about okay. Similarly, dungeons, where you can only have 5 people, some specs will obviously be really good for the rigours of Mythic plus raid dungeoneering, and some won't. Like rogues, I mean, one of our officers keeps saying that one of the reasons why rogues are so few in Legion, although they weren't exactly common in the last expansion either, is because they were so crap for Mythic plus dungeons at the start of the expansion. They're really good now, but they were absolutely appalling at the start. So you can imagine a lot of players not wanting to play rogue then. And now it's playing catch-up because they're really strong. But there's hardly any of them about. No, marksmen don't obviously want to be moving around for fun. At the same time, the other thing with ranged, of course, is you can get you can plant your feet in whatever's likely to be the position where you're not going to have to do a lot of movement. Main question tonight: do you think Blizz should listen more to players when it comes to class design? Yes and no. I don't think they should listen to forums any more than they already do. What I do think they should... There's two types of listening I think they should increase. The first type, and I've said this before, I actually got berated for going over the same things I always talk about, but, you know, you've asked the question, so here it is. They should post in-game surveys on various aspects of content. And they should ask, and it's purely subjective because you can't ask for detailed answers because then, you know, you haven't got the capacity to read them all. But a 1 to 5 opinion, do you enjoy from 1 to 5 bits of content? And then one of them could be your class and stuff like that. So that's one of the things they could do. But there is a second thing where they should definitely listen more than they are. And that is, there will be a question I'll submit for Blizzcon. But the problem is that Forum 3 is not active. It only becomes active on Friday for a bit. And then not again. But I will think of something to ask. It won't get asked, because it never does. But I will always put something in. Yeah, there are a small number of very senior theory crafters in the community that have direct access and communication with developers. They should listen to them more. Hi, Pinky Tiger. I'm fine, thank you. They do. Ian Hazakostas did say at the last one that they do look at logs and sims more than their internal stuff, which is fair enough. Logs are really... The thing is, I keep meaning to do a video on this. I'll have to at some point, maybe for next week. There are certain drawbacks to logs, which they are always very keen to point out, which are totally valid. But they often use those as arguments for not looking at logs at all. You do have to look at logs, because if you just look at... there's two types of thing that always used to come out. The latter that doesn't really come out so much. So obviously you can't see logs until the content's live. So you don't have any for a few weeks, really, to compare to. Then you have sims. And what people used to do, you don't get so much of this anymore. In fact, it upset someone when I told them this. I upset someone so much in Ret Paladin Discord answering their question that they ended up getting kicked from the place. There's the Sims is all set for patch. It's a set of gear, and it's not even done by one person. I'm actually thinking of doing my own for each DPS spec at least, although not for the purposes of doing this, for something else. And how do I upset? I'll tell you in a moment. But anyway, so you used to get these Sims, and it just had, for a standard fight length in whatever was considered a standard set of gear, for a patchwork fight, and it would just have the DPS rankings. And people always want to look at that to see what's going to be best, but that doesn't tell you what's the best. Like, if you'd have looked at a set of those rankings for, say, Tomb of Sargeras, it might not have had rogues near the top. But rogues have been the most sought-after class, DPS class, for the whole of Tomb of Sargeras, for other reasons, for non-DPS. I mean, obviously, you know, they've got good DPS as well, you play subtlety. But for non-DPS reasons, they were stronger, and that's what you need to look at as well. But the way I upset them, because someone came in basically asking if anyone had done these for Antorus, these Sims, and I said no, and there's no such thing. They're not, you know, they've never existed, is what I basically said, because even when Sims did exist, where someone produced a chart, they were totally misleading. They were meaningless, in fact, because it didn't tell you how strong a class was. But that's the thing, people just want to see a number, you know, how strong am I? Number, that's where your percentiles come in. How strong is my class? Sims, that's where the number comes in. They got really upset by this. Right, massively. I've never seen anything like it. Spectacularly upset. They became quite abusive very quickly. Will the artifact spell ability stay in the game for certain classes? I imagine it would stay in the game for all classes. Because they made a great store of the fact that they've redesigned classes from... What do they say? They just went off on a rant. They've just been abusive. So one of the mods kicked them in the end. You won't be able to see it anymore. They were kicked. Anyway, it was ages ago. It was like a week ago or something. Blimey, good luck trying to go back a week in the Ret Paladin Discord. But the... so the abilities, like, they redesigned all the classes, and some of them a lot for Legion, and they made a great store of that they were, like, almost starting from the beginning again. Not quite, but, you know. They're not going to then say they're doing the same thing for the next expansion, because that would be silly. So they have to keep those abilities. They have to just bake them into our base. I mean, they, you know, sometimes put bonuses into baseline things anyway. They'll just do the same here. So, Dovrak, your guild has gone from heroic to try and mythic. I am still interested, yeah. If you PM me or something like that, if you have any sort of experiences there. On the topic of sims, it's fine just using raid bots, or do you have to learn how to use simulation craft? Depends what you want to do. For most things, raid bots will be fine. It doesn't have... It's pretty good, actually, for most things. There are some things that it can't do, of course, but those things most people wouldn't need to do. Part of balance is the performance gap from bottom to top players of a given spec. This is one of the things they say is a drawback to just looking at logs. So their argument, they use majors as their argument, so I'll use the same because it's perfectly valid. So and they were using this during Nighthold, by the way, not now. Frost and Fire are both pretty good. But at the time, let's say it was Fire that was the best. I can't remember. So what they said is, let's say it'd be more true to use rogues, actually. We'll say about rogues, Hymenov. So let's say rogues, because at the moment, for most fights in Tomb of Sargeras, you'd want to be subtlety. But there's quite a few rogues that just play assassination for everything. My rogue included. Because it's easier. So let's say subtlety is the better spec, which it is. For most fights, not all of them. So all the best players will play subtlety. Because the best players will learn and play whatever spec is best, and they will get good at it. So that leaves people who either don't have the commitment or the skill to learn the more difficult spec, picking assassination because it's easiest. So what will happen is, although in theory subtlety will be better than assassination, the actual logs, if you look at the logs ranking, subtlety will look way better than assassination, like beyond proportion. But that's because you've got a higher proportion of the best players just playing that spec. Now, that's not an argument that really works for single DPS spec classes like Paladins, Monks, Priests, and Demon Hunters, because we've only got one DPS spec, so everyone plays that, best players and worst players of that class. Well, it was skewed slightly, I suppose, with Rets, because some of the more advanced players went off and played Rogue, but there you go. But for classes for which there is at least 2 DPS specs, the gap between 2 specs can look larger than it really is. But that doesn't mean to say that the gap doesn't exist, because if the gap didn't exist, then you wouldn't get all the best players choosing that better spec. So in terms of the gap, it might not be relevant, but in terms of the fact that there is a difference, that is. Hang on, what am I missing here? You've been using the WoW Analyzer tool. I've seen it before, yes. Preach made a video how some RNG to prevent top players from controlling aspect. Yeah, no, I was talking about this on the stream, actually. Someone mentioned this on the stream on Saturday, I think it was. It hasn't backfired. Preach has a bit of a thing. Okay, this is personal to him. Someone was saying he was talking about RPPM trinkets, stuff like that. He's been talking about RPPM. I've noticed he's brought a video out in the last day, hasn't he, about RPPM. He's got a bee in his bonnet. This is not something that the overall raiding community has an issue with. This is just him, I promise you. With RPPM trinkets, you had this thing before where it basically always procced on a regular cycle. And if you know what the internal cooldown of it was, you could, there's no drama. It's just, everyone has their, everyone has their little fixations. I have mine, you know. In-game polls been one of mine, for example. But everyone has their things. And obviously when you're a YouTuber, you're going to talk about them. But yeah, you have these trinkets. If you knew the internal cooldown, you could create a weak aura, or I used to use Tell Me When. Well, I still use Tell Me When, but I used to use Tell Me When for this as well. That would let you know when it's going to come off cooldown. So you could see exactly when this trinket was going to proc. Now, because you knew exactly when it was going to proc, that meant, you know, if it was about to proc in, say, 10 seconds and you had cooldowns now, you might go, I'll just hold off on those cooldowns for another 10 seconds and then use them all together. That will mean that you can do more damage. But Blizzard didn't like that. And so they've made it much more random. There also used to be a thing in Warlords of Draenor, which doesn't happen anymore, where these trinkets would always fire as soon as you started a fight as well. So that was the one, even after MOP, when they sort of removed this internal cooldown thing, they still would proc as soon as you got into combat on the first pull. So again, it allowed you to line up everything at the start of the fight. Now, some people, and even that they've sort of gone away from now, they want it to be random. So sometimes people think that it requires skill to do this. Now, my attitude has always been it doesn't actually require skill. It's not a test of skill using these trinkets. It's just a test of, have you created some notification so that you can track it? That's all it is. That's not skill, that's just knowledge. It's a bit like, you know, there are some times when I've been, it's not just my current guild, like in past guilds as well. Sometimes, you know, an effect comes in and people just die to it all the time, or they get caught out by it all the time. And you think to yourself, how are they doing that? How are they doing it? And the only conclusion I've ever come to is, I bet this person doesn't have notifications of it. Because we have add-ons now for raid encounters. You know, if something happens, if it happens on a timer, we've got a timer. You can even on bigwigs give you a countdown for it. If it's not on a timer, but it's something else, like you get an effect, you can have a weak aura that screams at you, this thing is on you, do something. But if people don't have those, then they can be unaware of it. You know, I have GTFO, for example, a nice simple add-on that sounds a siren if I am stood in bad. Some people don't. So some people don't notice if they're standing in crap because they don't have anything to... So they've just got to look at it visually. Whereas, you know, and you should have your character clear and be looking at that. But sometimes you focus on other things. It might be, you might be looking at something, a different part of your screen that's coming towards you and you want to make sure you're moving away from that and you're studying something else. So... you know, notifications are not skill for me. It's just, do you have them? If you don't have them, obviously you're going to fall foul of these things a lot. If you do have them, it's not actually difficult to use them. It's not that difficult. There are some things that are difficult. I mean, people keep going, oh, you know, is anything difficult in WoW? Of course it is. If it wasn't, then everyone would do the same. But they don't. But it's not. So there are skill things. I just, personally, it's my opinion, don't think that use of the RPPN trinkets as they existed before is an aspect of skill. Because I think you can just tell someone, use this, create this Tell Me When, put it there, and if people could see it, they'd be able to think for themselves whether or not they should use their cooldowns, depending on how long there's left to go on that proc. So I don't think it's a skill thing. Anyway, let's catch up. What am I doing? Doing more 14 on your DK. How hard can it be a pug? So, if you're in Europe, then it's still this week, which means tyrannical, raging, and necrotic, isn't it? I've only done one this week. That was a pug as well. But it was Court of Stars. Everyone knows. Court of Stars is always fine on any affix because everyone knows Court of Stars. I hate Court of Stars, and yet I've probably done Court of Stars more than any other dungeon, along with Arquay, which I also hate. And I've never liked these. I didn't like them when I tried them out in the alpha, even. I just don't like the idea of those dungeons. But it has to be said that Court of Stars, people have done it so often, that, you know, everyone knows it. So it's sort of fine on anything. Blackrook hold. Locke was surprised that 40% cooldown still one-shots him. He thought interesting video. Wasn't really grinding an axe. No, I wouldn't describe it as grinding an axe. I just think it's just one of his things. He wants it in the game, and so like anyone else, he'll try to look for evidence that it should be brought back to the game, an argument that it should be brought back. Like anything, we all have things that we want in the game, and we will always try and make arguments that they be brought in. But he says, just point out some things Blizzard did try to add proc effects without letting them be stacked ahead of time. But been so new, I don't think that it's been so numerous though. All they've done to these proc effects is change the way they work. They haven't added in extra procs to make their proc system work. You know, trinkets don't have multiple procs. They have a proc if they have a proc at all. It's just that it's totally unpredictable now. But, you know, it's not one of those things where, like, if you look at the things that, like, Mythic Raiders complain about, it's things like Titanforging, which no one else does, by the way. I had a comment on that video I did about Titanforging. Oh, don't take Titanforging away. They won't take Titanforging away because it does what Blizzard wants it to do. The only people that don't like Titanforging as a group are Mythic Raiders. Well, that's quite a small proportion of the overall player base. So that's not going to sway anyone. So for everyone else, Titanforging, everyone likes it. So, of course, they will keep it in. Oh, yeah, Dota, yeah. Do you think a map editor would be a good tool for WoW? I don't see how you do have a map editor. It's too complex because it's proper 3D. I remember, and I used to love this, I spent ages on this, a Doom editor back in the day. And you could make, and I used to make puzzles in my maps. It was quite fun giving it to an actual good Doom player, because a friend of mine, because I always set them up not to require a lot of what I used to call arcade skill, but problem solving skills. But you could do that with Doom, because Doom wasn't really a 3D game. It was a 2D game, cunningly disguised as a 3D game. Whereas WoW is really 3D. So I don't know how easy it would be to make an editor that would allow any old fool to be able to realistically create a map. Do we think we should be able to Titanforge our own gear 5 item levels at a time? No, it would defeat the purpose. I mean, they are giving us the ability in Antorus to upgrade one of the Path of the Titans trinkets each week. I mean, that's another way of extending. It's all about extending the content. And that is another way of extending the content. Every time we kill Antorus, we're going to get one of these tokens, which we can use to upgrade our our other trinkets, the Path of the Titans trinkets, in just the same way that we did upgrade our legendary with Archimon tokens. Like, they want the upgrades to be... They have in the past introduced this, haven't they? In past expansions towards the end, and who's to say they won't do it again, where they allow you to use what were Valor points to upgrade the item level of your gear. But that was just a way of, I think, nerfing the fights. Whereas these days, we're much more likely to have... you know, I think Titanforging, they're just going to see that as the way that that happens. Well, this is what you talk about, evolution, about a cap on the amount of the gear can go up. But that's not what Titanforging is about. Titanforging is about, like, it being able to go up a lot. It's all about dangling that carrot to get us to want to do it. Because even though we've stopped doing Heroic Timber Sargeras as mains... we still do runs, and we spent a long time. We only just recently stopped doing Heroic Timber Sargeras on mains, even though we did it on an off night, of course. We've started doing them as alt runs now, but there's still some people come on their mains instead of alts, And that is because some of them still think, you know, obviously, if any, because we still use Master Loot, if anything really good drops, like we have had 955s in Heroic drop, and if one dropped, then obviously any mains in there are going to have first shout on it over and out. Elder Scrolls have editors and 3D. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how well it will work. I'm just a little bit dubious about how well you can actually create a zone as a kit. I don't know if it can be done. It can be done. Hold on, what am I missing? That 5 things keep getting suggested by Asmongold, but I just don't get it. What 5 things? Have I missed something? Oh, upgrading your gear. Right. Well, because Mythic Raiders don't want randomness in their gear. Like, when I say randomness, like normal randomness of what drops each week, that's fine. Because over a short period of time, that luck evens itself out. But you're talking about the sort of luck that doesn't even itself out. That's the sort of RNG Raiders don't like, because they want to be able to plan and control, and you can't do that. Titanforging doesn't allow you to do that. The legendary system doesn't allow you to do that. They could use Veiled Argonite for item level upgrades if they wanted to do that. And it could well be that at some point they decide to. It's just that when you think about the reasons why we used to get the +5 item level upgrades, it was all about, you know, the top guilds have killed the content now. It's time to allow some of the guilds who are stuck on a boss to get through it. What do we do? Do we nerf the boss? It's always better to buff the players than it is to nerf the boss, because people like buffs. So you let people upgrade their gear with whatever. Yes, it could be Veiled Argonite at the moment, and people are happy. That makes people a lot happier than nerfing a boss. I still don't have an Arcana Crystal, though I haven't gone all out to try and get one. Right, Finway, do you believe... Hold on. Sub-races will be a real thing. I know sub-races will be a real thing. Don't ask me how, but I do know for a fact that they are a real thing. I'm not saying I know all the details, but I know that sub-races are definitely a thing. And it's not just based on that leak. Even though the leak is pretty, you know, you've got to be really, really disciplined at being suspicious of information to not want to read a lot into that. But I know sub-races, I think. What's my opinion on the legendary tokens? My opinion is only the opinion of people who've already got them, which is the thing I don't get about the legendary token thing. Like, I can imagine Blizzard's standpoint on this. People complaining about it, but there's... people complain about the legendary tokens, and Blizzard are just going, what are you complaining about? You were getting nothing, now you're getting something. The problem is, the something is worthless. Okay? If these players don't have alts, and let's face it, yes, there are some people who just play this game constantly, and I mean constantly. They may well not only have all the legendaries on their main, they may also have a load of alts. But most people are... I won't have to wait till my deathbed. I'll probably be able to tell you when WoW finishes. Most people who have all the legendaries on their main probably do that because they don't spend a lot of time on alts, if any. Because they spend all their time on their main. They do Mythic Pluses on their main. They do Raids on their main. And Blizzard talked about it future-proofing as if, well, you know, we've just put it in now. But really, it's the sort of thing people are going to benefit from later on. But the people getting it right now are the people who are going, yeah, great, a priest token. I don't have a priest. Fantastic. You know, And I'll bet you it's worst of all. It would be worst of all for someone like me. I can't get one because I don't have all the Paladin legendaries. There's still about... there's quite a lot for Paladins. There's still about half a dozen I don't have. I actually don't know if it's any more than anyone else. But there's still quite a lot I don't have. But let's say I had them all. Now, I also have quite a few alts. Some of which I play, some of which I don't. But I'll be honest, like, say I don't play my Demon Hunter at the moment. But if I got a Demon Hunter legendary, I wouldn't complain because I've at least got a Demon Hunter. I'll give it to them. But let's say I got a Mage one. I haven't, you know, I've got Mages dotted around on my accounts. But I don't have one that I'm planning to level anytime soon. I don't have one who could wear a legendary. So this token would be useless. I could pass it to a Mage. They wouldn't be able to use it because they're not high enough level. So... the random aspect, as I say, it wouldn't be as bad if it was a token that you turned into a vendor for a class token. Now, I'm not suggesting you should be able to choose the legendary, but if you could at least choose the class, that would be better. Because it's not realistic at any point in Legion. It's all right, Blizzard saying this is more for later on when more people... even when more people have got their... all the legendaries for their class, they still probably don't have 11 alts. Why do I think the dungeons that have been added after launch are so hard to balance with Mythic Plus? Lack of testing or wacky scaling system. In the case of, I mean, lack of practice, testing definitely, because there was a distinct... all the dungeons that came out at launch were tested extensively. For like 9 months nearly. I mean, not all of them were out to begin with, I think. But they were tested a lot. God, I've forgotten it now. Karazhan. Karazhan was, to begin with, that massive dungeon, which didn't lend itself to Mythic Plus. So then, I don't even know if they intended it ever to be Mythic Plus. But when they brought it out as Mythic Plus and split it into two, it didn't really work. Now, the other two, I think, there's, you know, Cathedral and Thete. I mean, I didn't even know there was a problem with Thete, as I say. But Cathedral, it was just lack of testing. There's nothing actually wrong with the dungeon. There's no reason why Cathedral should be a particular problem for Mythic Plus. It was just lack of testing on that. Which emphasises why it's so important that expansions get as much testing as they do. You know, that's why their idea a few years ago to bring out an expansion every year was unworkable, because you can't possibly give it the right amount of testing. It's actually not uncommon for content that comes out partway through an expansion as opposed to at the start for it to be less balanced because it's had less testing. Because you get more people testing stuff during an alpha and a beta than you can ever get during a PTR. It lasts longer and you've got more people actually doing it. Because even though anyone can go onto the PTR, whereas alphas and betas are by invitation only, not that many people do, really. Do I think they'll let us go with the legendaries? They did actually say, Ian Hazakostas did say that they might, for the pre-expansion patch, let us just wear all our legendaries without restriction. Whether they will or not, I mean, they might. The thing is, whenever you get a pre-expansion patch, they always bring in the systems for the following expansion. Now, that's going to be interesting with the as far as the artifacts go. But that's what they do. So, balance goes out of the window anyway. Completely out of the window. I mean, I remember, like, at the end of MOP, particularly, you know, you were doing Siege of Orgrimmar and Siege Master. As soon as the pre-expansion patch out, you could do so much damage that you could burst down the Siege Master in a matter of seconds. There was no need to go and do the belt, for example. You were burning through Archimond before he was doing his different phases, all that sort of stuff. So, can you do Mage Towers with pre-expansion pack? They may not. I don't actually know whether they intend to stop that when Legion stops or when the pre-expansion patch comes out. Sometimes things like that are stopped with the pre-expansion patch stage. So it might well be that 8.0, the Mage Tower stops being a thing. I don't know. That would be an interesting question to get clarified, actually. But I actually don't know. It could go either way, something like that. I think, again, people use the word RNG too glibly here in terms of Legion being dominated by RNG. I think, if anything, when it comes to RNG, Legion has been dominated by what I call bad RNG. There is good RNG that's in any game. I think it's the unpopular RNG that has been a particular problem for Legion. And I don't think it's necessary to the scale that they've done. The Legendary system is actually one system where they have at least made improvements to it. There are some systems they haven't. But I don't think they've succeeded with the Legendary system because I don't think they fully appreciated what players want of it. Whereas their success story, I think, is Mythic Plus Dungeons. I think with Mythic Plus Dungeons, they've also made improvements to that. And they've largely succeeded. I think, you know, that's a big success for them. What was the reaction when WoD was first announced? It was very positive. I was appalled by it because all we got. This is the thing. This is why I don't expect to find loads out at this BlizzCon. There'll be just as much speculation because it's funny. Someone was putting in a comment on one of my videos again. Why the speculation so close to BlizzCon, as if we're going to find out everything at BlizzCon? We're not. There's going to be just as much. In fact, BlizzCon will raise more questions than it answers, I guarantee it, because it's the same every launch of an expansion, like as in the announcement of it. So with WoD, everyone was super excited. We didn't get a lot of detail. And in fact, some of the things they did say were going to be in it then turned out not to be in it because they cut it. And then Blizzard tried to say, oh no, we never said it was. It's like, yeah, you did. I was appalled because it involved time travel and alternate universe. Absolute lore nightmare. Absolute shocker. So I was absolutely distraught by it. Also, the other thing I was really annoyed about was MOP. I loved MOP because it had the new lore. The genuinely new lore. Instead of just dragging up a villain from Warcraft 3, they actually did new lore. And then WoD, it's almost like, because people weren't that happy with MOP in general, I was. It's almost like Blizzard thought to themselves, oh, they don't like new lore then. I know, let's dig up every old lore character we can and put it in an expansion. How do we do that? They're all dead. I know, let's go back in time. Oh, but aren't we going to then muck about with the future? Ah, no, what we'll do is we'll go back in time to an alternate universe. That'll fix it. So, yeah. Do I think affixes should be removed and just make the Mythic Plus harder to compensate? No, I like the affixes. I think they're good. They're not balanced week to week, but that's part of the fun. I mean, the thing is, it's only a problem if you have to farm Mythic Plus Dungeons for AP. But this is where I think they've made a real improvement. With Mythic Plus, because you don't have to do, like, there have been times in Legion where I've had to do Mythic Plus after Mythic Plus after Mythic Plus after Mythic Plus. It's what I would do in all Friday evenings and sometimes bits of Saturdays as well, when you're pushing to get the cap, when you could get cap. Then, now that they've made it so, I quite happily do one Mythic Plus dungeon a week. If I'm available and people want me to do a Mythic Plus dungeon in addition to that, then I'll do that as well. I'm fine doing that. But I only feel the need to do one, as long as it's a plus 10 even. I mean, I did a plus 15 this week, but all it had to be was, if someone would have said, do you want to do this plus 10? I'd have gone, yes, I'll do this plus 10. And that's fine for me. Yes, you'll get more AP if you do more, but not so much for the time invested that you feel compelled to do it. So as a result, if you feel you only have to do one a week, then I think it doesn't matter what the affixes are. You can do a plus 10. Although quite soon we'll have to do a plus 15 anyway. Necrotic is worse for tanks. Yeah, I don't care about it at all. Except, of course, when I was doing that Court of Stars, I was wishing I was recording it. I had so much footage if I did, but I didn't. And there was one bit in it where this tank was tanking some mobs, but we just killed the thing I can't remember the name of. That basically means one of the mini bosses is going to come towards you from the second boss. And he did that, and we were tanking these mobs, and then that mob came along, and he was right in it as well. He was right in the path of it. He didn't move it out. So we ended up on that, and he died, basically. So what happened was, everyone died. There was just me left alive. So I was soloing this thing. Then the healer came back and started healing it, and occasionally taunting it off me, which was really annoying. It's a Mistweaver monk, because, you know, it was taunting it off me when I was having my Shield of Vengeance up and I wanted to be hit, or when I wanted to use you know, something else that meant I didn't want it moving off me. But yeah, so I ended up basically soloing it with this Mistweaver monk. Which actually, it would have been quicker if I'd have just died and we all rezzed up, but damned if I was going to be dying. But no, I think the affixes are good. I don't think they should just make it difficult in terms of anything else. I mean, it's just subjective. That's just my opinion. Because I do think it makes it more interesting. It gives it more strategy as well. You've got to start to think to yourself about how you're going to deal with it. I mean, the one downside to it, yeah, is argue that sometimes you get an affix where some tanks will have an easy time of it, some will have not an easy time of it. Another one where some tanks will have an easy time than another is skittish, say. Same with some DPS. Like, I don't worry too much about skittish. I'm not saying it never kills me as a DPS, but, I mean, I'm a plate wearer that's got bubble. I don't worry excessively about skittish. No, the exploding orbs thing I'm not keen on. Because you lose so much damage targeting them just to hit them once. What did I make of the Lordaeron logo being spotted on the BlizzCon thing? I thought what was more interesting was not the fact that someone snapped a picture of the Lordaeron logo, but the fact that it was removed. That was what was telling. Because up until that point, you can just think it's just a cool design. Once it's removed, then you think, ah, we are supposed to read something into it. So at that point, it becomes news. They should have just left it. They should have just said, yeah, it's a Lordaeron symbol. What? Yeah, what? And they should have just left it at that. Because the problem is, once it's out there, it's out there. You can delete the picture. You can't remove the newsworthiness of it. All you do is stoke the rumours. So they should have just left it. I'd have just left it. But yes, it is interesting. I mean, it's too late to try and think about what it might mean as such. You know, maybe they're just going to bring back the story. Because at the moment, in the Plague Lands, for example, since Wrath of the Lich King, there's been the new quest where it's supposed to be showing that the Plague Lands are being cleansed. So maybe they're going to bring back, maybe they're going to update the Plague Lands. Just like with Silithus, the Silithus Zone is getting a new version. Maybe there's going to be a new version of Plague Lands as well. This is going to be, maybe that's just going to be called Lordaeron again. Except, of course, Lordaeron includes Tirisfal Glades and all that business as well. Yeah, I mean, I'm usually fine for dealing with the explosive orbs. It's wasted DPS. The Alliance retake Lordaeron. Well, they really should, but I've got a sneaking suspicion that, if anything, it'd be the Horde. Because remember, the Undead, the Forsaken, have already taken South Shore, which was a bit of a cheek, if you ask me. And they are the ones who are most closely placed, being as they are located at the, like, in the capital of Lordaeron. When you have 10 plus mobs, it's hard to find the right one that stacks an apex. Well, the worst thing about explosive is when someone does their usual thing of grabbing loads of mobs because I can take it, and they fail to appreciate that that means not only are loads of orbs going to spawn, but they might spawn from where you grabbed the mobs from over there somewhere, which is not where you are. It's particularly annoying, explosive, actually, on the first boss of Eye of Ashara, that warlord fella, because they sometimes spawn at the ranged Naga. I'm not having that. What sub-race will I be? There's not going to be a sub-race for humans. I don't think. Well, at the moment, Lordaeron, you know, if you look at the lands of Lordaeron, part of it already belongs to the Horde, and the rest of it's neutral. Sort of. So... You can, yeah, but a lot of places where in dungeons you don't have a line of sight opportunity on explosive, and also it's quicker to just beat the orb up than it is to run around the corner, assuming there's a corner there to run around. No, I'm not going to go Draenei. I have sometimes thought about it. Like, when I left my original realm of Asjol Nerub, I always, like, when I've been on a realm for some time, I always leave a placeholder behind so someone can't steal my name. And the paladin I have on there called Thete is a Draenei. It's like, I don't know, level 80 something, or maybe, no, it might be, no, actually, it's at least level 90 because I started WoD with it. I just didn't do anything. I haven't done the class hall quest for any of the mounts apart from the paladin one. It's the only one I've done. Jacinthia. I can't remember. I'm not very good with names. I played on Asjol Nerub mostly vanilla and TBC. At the very start of Wrath, but then I sort of stopped playing the game. Then I came back at the end of Cataclysm, and that was still to Asjol Nerub. Now, during TBC, I did actually move somewhere else and then come back. But then in MOP, after round about halfway through the first tier, I moved realms, and I've never been back to Asjol Nerub since. I've already answered this, but with sub-races, do you think they'll take the racials or just give them to the sub-races or make new ones? I don't think they... Well, I don't know what they'll do. In terms of what I think they should do, I don't think they should make new racials. I don't think they will either. But my issue, I think with the racials that affect gameplay should be basically abolished. I think they should just make racials flavorful, as they would say. You know, have the interesting effects. Like the racials that buff a particular profession or something like that is fine. But I wouldn't... Anything that has an actual effect on gameplay, whether PvP, PvE, or like or anything like that, anything like hard part of the game that gives you an actual benefit on, I think they should just get rid of. But whether they will or not, it's the sort of thing they might do, but they haven't really talked about. I don't think I've ever heard them in Legion talk about racials at all, whether saying that they think they're okay or not. Maybe that's the question I should ask at BlizzCon. Yeah, maybe that'd be my BlizzCon question. You know, should they remove any racials that affect the power of a character? What's the most spooked I've been playing WoW? I'm not sure I've ever been spooked playing WoW. There was, hang on a minute. I need to find something on Twitter. Let's see how quickly I can find it. There have been games where I've been spooked, but I don't think World of Warcraft's ever been one. Let's see. Hang on, can I? Yeah, no, Arcane Torrent should be the first thing they remove. What the hell is this? Oh, I'm not logged in here, that's why. Never mind, it'll do. Because I'm sure it's on here. Somewhat. Oh, God. Oh, my God. Right, hold on. Here it is. This is fantastic, this. This is apparently in a museum in Washington, D.C. That would scare the crap out of you, wouldn't it? Apparently there's a sign telling you to touch the glass if you dare. So, yeah. Let's get rid of that. But, Phoenix... Aha! I know Phoenix Rising. I didn't raid with them, no. But I can tell you stories about them. I raided with Keepers of Azeroth during Vanilla. The voice in WoW You'll Die, that was Cthulhu. Yeah, it didn't really spook you, though. But, yeah, so Phoenix Rising, it was quite funny with those. Unless you're thinking of the Horde Guild. If you're thinking of the Alliance Guild, then yes. Because this was the Alliance Guild. So what happened was, so I was in Keepers of Azeroth, but I wasn't in there from the start. I joined them in like September, October time, 2005. No, I gathered their history before that. Before summer, they were raiding, and then the leaders of that guild went off to form another guild called Semper Fidelis, who I joined later on. They're actually a nice guild. But these two leaders were not nice people. So basically what happened is they eventually got kicked by the new guild they made because they're basically arseholes. And they came back to this new guild. Now, to Keepers of Azeroth, the original guild, which was at the time being run by a priest called Rhodos. Very nice chap, Dutch guy. And he'd basically built, I mean, because the guild had split, it was left with nothing. So he built it back up into a raiding guild. And that's the point at which I joined it when they were building it back up. And so, but these two, it was clear they didn't just want to come back to the guild, that they wanted to take it over again. So they kept trying to undermine the new guild master. I mean, they were totally out of order. So eventually what happened was he got so sick of it, and so did everyone else, that he kicked them from the guild. But then they started a bit of a whispering campaign, unbeknownst to like most people, saying that they were going to start a new guild and it was going to be the server beating guild and all the rest of it. And he basically poached away most of the best players and, you know, or the longest standing players. But it included some of the best players. So what happened is, woke up one Sunday morning to find half the guild had disappeared into the night. So it basically all happened again. So we recruited and carried on. So they created a new guild. Now, they'd already planned to create the new guild before they created it. And they planned to call it Phoenix Rising. You know the thing. They're trying to imagine to justify it to themselves. Oh, Keepers of Azeroth is a dead guild. We're going to emerge like a phoenix from the ashes. Unfortunately, and they'd marketed themselves as that. They made a website and all the rest of it. Unfortunately, there was already a guild on Azure Nero called Phoenix Rising, which is a Horde guild. So they couldn't call themselves that when it came time to make the guild. But they were so set on this idea that they thought, I know, we'll just call ourselves PR. After which, we just refer to them as Project Retard. And that's how it turned out as well. Because did they end up being a server beating guild? No. Did they even beat us? No. They got nowhere. Because these guys leading it were absolutely appalling. They were shocking. So they ended up, and it was actually quite sad for the good players in it, because rather than like, because back then as well, you couldn't realm transfer, so you were stuck trying to get yourself into a guild. Well, who were they going to join? They couldn't join us, because they weren't very well liked anymore. They couldn't join the guilds above us because they didn't need people. They certainly didn't need people from a shit guild like that, because that's what it ended up becoming. And absolutely, it achieved nothing. The best thing it ever achieved, I think, was killing Hakar and Zul'Gurub. I think eventually they did kill Ragnaros, because that was what was annoying as well. They left at the point at which we were quite close to killing Ragnaros in Molten Core. And because it wasn't just that most of our best geared players had left, they'd also left with the fire resist gear. So we had to get more fire resist gear crafted, and that wasn't a straightforward thing because you needed the materials from Molten Core. So you had to be farming Molten Core to get the actual bloody materials, as well as pay a load of gold to the one person on the realm who could craft this stuff. Well, no, sometimes it does. So it's like a guild merger, isn't it? Most guild mergers fail. Of course they do. But they don't all. Some succeed. The core players that left with did you let them all back in? No. In fact, no one even asked to come back in. None of them even asked. That was the sad thing. So most of these players just ended up stopping playing the game. They just stopped. But none of them even asked to come back in. It's not that they were turned down. Most of them would have been turned down. Because it was considered a pretty shitty thing to do. Because the intention was to do two things. One, to make this new guild. And two, to completely cripple us. And you've got to remember, for people who'd been in this guild longer than I had, this is the second time these same two people had done this. These same two people had taken away a load of the guild to make a new guild. Now, the first time they did that, that guild ended up succeeding. But that was probably because they had other leaders in it that eventually took over. Whereas the second guild they made obviously didn't. I don't remember the name. I don't remember many names though. I'm really bad at names. Yeah, we'll have to mop. I mean, that's the obvious thing you would do. You would have two guilds merged together. That's the obvious thing to do with heroic guilds as well. Like heroic guilds that say they don't have the numbers, merge with another one. Most again will fail. Some will not. Life of Brian scene. Which Life of Brian scene? Maybe who was just tired of the English paladin. There were several paladins in that guild. Because back then, of course, you had lots of each class, or several of each class. You'd have about 6 or 7 of each class, which is why you had class leaders, which you don't have anymore. So it was actually easier to recruit then as well, or at least you could be more informed when you were... Oh, right, okay. Because, you know, if someone applied, you instantly had someone in the guild who would be able to see if they're any good or not. Didn't have logs or anything like that then. So... But yeah, that's what we used to call them. I'm not saying that's what the server at large called them. It's just what we used to call them. Because it was just so hilarious. Because right from the start, they cocked it up from the start. They couldn't even call their guild what they wanted to call it. It's just too funny. And when we started, you know, because we didn't know they were going to fail. Because as I say, it would, for some of the people, as I say, that have been in the guild for longer, you know, the first attempt at a split had sort of worked. This new guild, Semper Fidelis, that worked, and that was still going. Expansions later, they were, you know, they were a really good. They ended up being a really good guild, a top guild, like not top as in top 10, but you know, well inside the top 100. So that worked. But the second attempt, yeah, didn't. And it's because, as I say, these two people that did it all were useless. They were terrible leaders. They were very unpleasant people as well. They're one of those smarmy people. Because I didn't know much about them, so I could only get it from other people. And obviously the other people were biased, but it seemed to me there were some of those smarmy people that are very nice to the people that they want something from and not very nice to anyone else. You would never join a guild that's less than 5 years old, blimey. You wouldn't join our guild then. The thing is, though, you know, how long a guild's been going is no guarantee of how long it's going to last. There are guilds that can boast they've been going around since vanilla that could go under in the next tier. Every tier guilds go under, and some of them have been going for years. What matters most is ultimately what kills a guild is just one thing, and that's the leadership gets tired. Yeah, it's Semper Fidelis. It is the Latin always faithful. I know that struck me as soon as when I found out, because it seemed strange to me that a guild that is formed from a split from another guild would be called always faithful, because obviously a guild with that history is anything but. So yeah, it seemed to me to be a fairly ironic name. But like I said with the Phoenix Rising, I think they chose the name out of a desire to justify what they were doing. Yeah, well, guilds will despise. As I say, what kills a guild is the leadership doesn't want to go in anymore for whatever reason. It might be that real life stuff comes up. It might be just because it's difficult and it just gets too much trouble. Ultimately, a guild fails when the leadership says, right, we're calling time on this. And not before. Any leadership that wants to put the time and effort in to keep it going can keep it going. It's not always easy, and it hasn't been easy this expansion. It's been bloody difficult, in fact. I haven't recruited anyone for ages. Absolutely ages. Can't remember the last time I recruited someone, in fact. On Lightbringer, most of the raiding guilds have been around since vanilla TBC. Newer ones don't seem to last long. Well, that's only because most new guilds will fail. But that doesn't mean to say that a newer guild is more likely to fail as such. Because by definition, a guild that's been around for a long time has been around for a long time. But when they were first formed, the other guilds that were forming at the same time, most of them fell under. I'm not recruiting you, Clefado. We're not actually desperate at the moment. I mean, that's why it's not a big deal. But, you know, there are a couple of things we could do with. Better than in Kata when everyone had a guild because of cash flow as well. Yeah, the old cesspool guilds. Yes. Hi, Frosttrade. Don't know. But, I mean, yeah, at the moment what we need to do is kill Jaden. The ugly word extend has cropped up again. We'll probably have to talk about that tomorrow. If we decide it's time to actually to extend. Because at the moment we know we've got the people to actually kill the boss. We just need... It would be nice if we had more people that don't get blown off the platform and stuff like that. Although, admittedly, yesterday I was making more than my fair share of cock-ups. I have to say, I don't know what was up with me. Although one of them wasn't really my fault. I killed someone when I had a bit of a coughing fit. It's a really bad time to have a coughing fit. And then blew up an orb, which killed the warrior. So that wasn't his fault. That was me. Guild isn't even farming Mythic anymore. Extending on Avatar. The thing is, extending is only something you do if you've got a particular reason to want to kill a boss really quickly. It's not something you do, by definition, for weeks on end. Because if you're doing it for weeks on end, you failed. You can argue that one reset worth of gear won't make that much difference. But like several resets worth of gear, that will make a difference. So look, most people, I'm not going to say all, used to complain about the content drought at the beginning of Legion. And most Legion people have been saying content has been coming. That seems to be too quick. What are my thoughts? I do think it's been coming a little quicker than it needs to. I don't like to complain about it, because then Blizzard would really feel, well, we can't do it right, can we? I mean, there is a balance. I do think raids can have a larger gap between them than they've had. You know, maybe not Emerald Nightmare. Emerald Nightmare was a bit of a damp squib, but other like the gap between Nighthold and Tomb of Sargeras could have been a bit larger, and that would have been okay. I'm not saying much, 2 or 3 weeks. The gap between Tomb of Sargeras, okay, they haven't announced the release date for Antorus, but we sort of know it's the 21st, 22nd. You know, they could have left that a bit longer as well. But obviously it's better than a content drought. I think the main problem is not so much how much content's been coming out, was how much of it we are compelled to do. I think that's the bigger problem. No one's going to complain about there being more content than you can do. You just don't do the content. You just prioritise it, don't you? It's fantastic. The issue is if you feel compelled to do more stuff than you want to do. Like what I want to do is raid. There's a few other things that I like questing as well. I like the leveling. So leveling I enjoy because of the, you know, that's where you get your storyline, your RPG fix from. Then I like raiding. I don't like a lot of the rest of it. Some little bits. But I don't like feeling I have to do things. And that's what it makes me feel. Do I think without the early AP ground there wouldn't have been a lack of content? Hold on. Without the early AP ground there would have been... I think if Mythic Plus Dungeons had have worked like they do now, they wouldn't have needed the early AP Grand. But it might be argued that without the AP Grand, yes, in the early days, people might not have seen it as having lots of content, yes. But that's because, as I say, I don't think they got the rewards quite right from Mythic Plus. They really want cutting edge. Yeah, but you're not going to get cutting edge by not killing Avatar. That's the problem, isn't it? Like, we might extend simply because there's only a few weeks left to go. We cannot miss out on cutting edge. It's getting quite bad now. Which is really bad. We cannot not get cutting edge. And the problem is this. We are farming the farmable bosses within about 2 hours. But Avatar can sometimes, like the week before last, we one-shot it. Last week, it took us the rest of the raid. We cannot spend an entire... Here's our thinking. At the moment, we have the possibility to spend the whole of Wednesday just farming our, you know, the first 8 bosses. That's too long. Then you have your raid on Thursday. That's fine. But then the last 2 Mondays have been really bad raids where we haven't made progress. And even though we had to call the raid an hour early yesterday because of internet problems, nonetheless, in the 3 hours that we did have, we were not making progress. So if we're of the opinion that Mondays is a bad night for us, that's only given us Thursday to make progress. That's like saying, you've got to kill Jaden. We're only about halfway through it. You've got 3 more weeks and you've got 1 raid night in each of those weeks. That doesn't sound comfortable. So that's why we might, and we haven't made a decision yet, but that's why we might think about extending. I am not normally someone in favour of extending, but that is a situation where you might. But if you're going to extend when you've got ages and ages before the tier comes to an end, then it should be for the purpose of a world rank, as in when you extend, you should expect to kill it in the next week or 2, basically. If you don't, then you made a bad decision. Releasing the week of Thanksgiving. Oh, well, I don't know. Thanksgiving obviously isn't a thing outside of the US. I don't know. I mean, no one's saying it's definitely the 21st. It's just that that's when it would be if it's this like 11-week gap thing. I mean, it might not be. They haven't said they're bringing stuff out every... It just so happens they have brought stuff out every 11 weeks. And because it's been every 11 weeks, that must be by design. That's all I'm thinking too. Oh, Canada. Do they? All right, how interesting. So they celebrate Thanksgiving as well, do they? Okay, North America then. I didn't know AP is what ties Legion together. Well, unfortunately, sort of. That and legendaries. But they'll have to think of another one. Oh, you have it at a different time. I think, though, Kisasha, if there are fewer people running Mythic Plus, and I bet there are, I absolutely bet there are, the reason for that is not because it's less rewarding. I think it's because it's there's less compulsion. See, it used to be the case that it was an efficient way to get AP to run lots of medium level dungeons, not high ones. Now the focus is on running, and what that meant was as well, because you wanted to run lots of medium level dungeons, you soon ran out of your own keys because you'd level them up too high. So then you would go and you would get like people, you would get pugs, you know, you would, as a group of 4 really good players, get someone who was not in a PvE guild or something like that, who had a good key, level 7 more souls, say, and you would run them through it. And you would keep doing that. So a lot of these players that at the moment might find it difficult to get into a pug to do their mythic key would have found a really good group who would do it for free, never mind for charge, for free, because there's the benefit for those players as well. And as I say, it was your benefit to run lots of medium level keys than it is to just push higher ones. Now we're pushing the higher ones. So I think for that reason, if not any other reason, then there's Thanksgiving is just like the 4th of July. I don't know. I don't see how it's screwing Europeans over. Like, we don't care much about the 4th of July either. Hang on. I've got to keep up with comments. Top Guild on your realm extended after Maiden for a few weeks and got Kill Jaden down about 2 weeks ago. The argument always when you extend is you've already got the... If you didn't think you had the gear for it, you wouldn't extend under any circumstances. But the thing is, with more gear, you give yourself a larger margin for error on those mechanics. Some people, you know, try as they might, will never learn the mechanics. They just will never learn them. So you need to be able to just push past. The other issue is, as you get later into the tier, like we could go, you know, we could kill our 8 farm bosses and get hardly any upgrades. That's the problem. So it's not just saying we don't need the gear. It could also be argued, are we even likely to get much of an upgrade by doing the farm? Now, if the farm would only... If we would kill Avatar, kill it quickly and stop messing about, and we could do the whole thing in 2 hours, then there'd be no question of extending. We wouldn't need to. Just do it in 2 hours, because you might get some better gear. And that, you know, when it comes to pushing a phase where you just need like that 0.1% extra damage, then that might give it you. But it's always a time thing with extending. That's the only good reason to extend, when you are up against it in terms of time. And when you've got the gear. So that's the only time I would ever sort of say, yeah, it's okay then. Because by definition, as soon as you've got the item level that Method had when they killed it, you've got the gear. Because apart from anything else, the fights have been nerfed since anyway. But how many people would have fancied that? Is it only you that thinks the ret set pieces for next year sounds a little boring? They are boring, but they're at the moment extremely powerful. In fact, it's too powerful. If Blizzard do not swap the 2 and the 4 set ret tier around quickly, we're going to end up doing stupid damage. Hi, Craft. How's Kill Jaden progress going? Not well. My favourite raid of Legion so far... Well, it can only be Nighthold, because it's between Nighthold and Tomb of Sargeras. You really can't count Emerald Nightmare or Tralavala. They're not going to be anyone's favourites. And by virtue of the fact that I don't like Team of Sargeras on Mythic mode, I thought it was quite good on Heroic, but just not Mythic. Oh, you saw a group today that wanted 940 plus for a plus 11. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. That means I'd have only just met the requirements to do this plus 11. Fail, isn't it? I mean, I've got almost no chance of getting into a pug because item level. I mean, you can see those requirements there, but also like sometimes people ask for Mythic plus score. Mine won't be very good because I hardly do any. Random question. Oh, hello. Help. What do you think the biggest difference in clever use of game mechanics and exploits is? Exploits is when you know that the game is not supposed to work like that. You're taking advantage of an unintended feature of the game. That's always the key thing between an exploit. It's whether you know that it shouldn't be doing this. Which is why there was that when Limit got banned during Helya, there was that was where there was quite a lot of arguments one way or the other. To my mind, it wasn't an exploit because they were using a strategy that people used on Mythic Archimond in Hellfire Citadel, and Blizzard were fine with that. Apparently, they were okay with that. But then all of a sudden they weren't okay with exactly the same thing being used on Helya, and it was exactly the same. If one's an exploit, they're both exploits, and yet they never had an issue with it on Mythic Archimond. But generally speaking, it's if you know that you're taking advantage of something that is not how the game is intended to be. I think the problem, Wilton, is that America has too many holidays. You keep saying that things keep coming out on this holiday and that holiday and the other holiday. I can only conclude from this that you basically have holidays all the time. Is there ever a month when you don't have a holiday? Or even a 2-week period? The thing is, it's not Thanksgiving that's going to prevent tuning to be done, stuff like that. What at the moment is going to cause problems, and this is why I say if Blizzard don't pull their finger out and deal with our set bonuses, then Rets are going to be too strong, which means the problem then is you think, well, what's the problem there? The problem is they'll not leave us too strong. They'll nerf the hell out of us. It's far better to have just switched those set bonuses around now before anyone's got them than it is to do it later and nerf us, because then we've been nerfed. No one likes being nerfed. Blizzard know this. They know that. During Hell, I love how you have to specify which time they got banned. Limit have had a little bit of trouble this expansion, it has to be said. I think they were treated very unfairly, though. I think it's fair to say. But, you know, there you go. Depends on what a holiday is. Any time when you spend extra money celebrating something. February has Valentine's Day. Well, would Valentine's Day interfere with your raiding? If the answer is yes, then yes, that's a holiday. Anything that people think would impact the raid schedule. Should we put it that way? In terms of World of Warcraft, its relevance to World of Warcraft. Well, there you are then. I will see. This is the thing. If you're not going to partner with someone, it's not the case whether you're married or not. If your partner isn't a gamer, then I can well understand that they will not be impressed by you saying that raiding comes ahead of Valentine's night. I understand that. I wouldn't have even dreamed of trying to raid on Valentine's Day when I had a partner, because she had no appreciation for gaming whatsoever. So, you know, that needs to be the lesson. You need to get with someone who's into gaming, or you need to accept the fact that these things will get in the way. In March, there isn't a work holiday. There is St. Patrick's Day. See, that's another thing. Americans go mad at St. Patrick's Day. It's not even to do. It's Ireland. This is Ireland. It's an Irish thing. And do you know something else as well? In Ireland, St. Patrick's Day is not as big a deal in Ireland as it seems to be in the United States. How mad is that? America, it's just any excuse for a party with Americans, it seems to me. Yeah, she wasn't a gamer there. She didn't understand. I used to have to keep locking my computer when I went away, because if I left myself online, she would type rude messages in guild chat. Yes, I've tried the beer in America. I think I'll stick to my own. I'm not actually a lager fan either. It seems to taste more like lager than anything to me. And I really don't like lager. It tastes like vomit. I don't need beer that tastes as bad on the way in as on the way out. Agree with set bonuses being switched. The 2-piece Arms Warrior set is in a 4-piece. Yeah, well, this, I mean, for Nighthold, they did switch them around. My issue is that they're half leaving it late. I don't understand. They know which ones are the most powerful. They also know that you should make the 4 set the most powerful, because otherwise what's going to happen is, as things stand at the moment, I am going to use 4-piece tier 20 and 2-piece tier 21. They don't want that. So why aren't they changing it? A ton of Americans did not come from Ireland. Ireland isn't that big. Some people from Ireland went to America. It's not a huge... No, there's not that... if Ireland emptied and went over to America, completely emptied, there would still not be a significant proportion of the United States Irish. They just... I think what happened was a number of Irish people went over there who liked a bit of a drink. Everyone else thought, oh, they seem jolly. I'll pretend I'm Irish too. Then that way I get to drink and everyone thinks it's characterful. Anyway, let's get back onto WoW. So a question, would you ever tell a DPS raider, say a ret, to a healer? Hang on. Would I ever tell a DPS raider to a healer? Do you mean tell them to heal? No. I would never tell anyone to change their role. If they choose to, then that's fine. I would never even tell anyone to change their spec. So if you had a DPS player, a character who had several specs to choose from, and I knew that they weren't playing the strongest, I wouldn't tell them to change. What I would say is, your DPS isn't good enough. We're going to take our best DPS on any progress fight. If that's not you, then you'll be on the bench. So what do you want to do? Do you want to change to a better spec, learn that, and get on there? Or do you want to be on the bench? It's as simple as that. So I never focus on the spec. In fact, I remember I said exactly that years ago in WoD when I came back to the... No, not WoD, sorry, Kata. When I came back to the game, there was an issue in the final tier when I think it was Arms Warriors were loads better than Fury Warriors. And someone was asking on the forum, they were in like... because Heroic was the hardest mode then. So they were in a normal guild, but it's what would now be called Heroic. And they were saying that, you know, they had this friend who was playing Fury. And they weren't doing very good damage. And they were saying, you know, this guy was saying, they should really be playing Arms. I've tried to tell them, but they don't fancy it. What should I do? And I was saying, you don't focus on the spec. You don't say to someone, you've got to play Arms. What you say to them is, your damage isn't good enough to be in this raid. Now, if you were to play Arms, it might go up. And you leave it at that. And if they still won't play Fury, it's not the issue with them playing Fury that's the problem. It's the fact that their DPS is low, which is the problem. So you need to focus on that issue. The only thing we'd ever tell people to do regarding that, if there's a utility talent we need them to take, we will tell them to do that. Yeah, I don't think people of Irish descent have multiplied more than other Americans. I think lots of Americans like procreating. Seems to be a thing. Anyway, has anyone heard of Seb Tattle before? Just got a whisper asking to go to a site and I'm suspended. Yes, very good. Yeah, exactly. I don't know how it must fool people, these fake GM things. I mean, to be fair, you wouldn't necessarily know that a GM message will come up in a separate window unless you've ever talked to a GM. But usually these messages from a supposed GM, it's obviously fake. When they tell you to go to a website that's not even a World of Warcraft or Blizzard website to put in some details, you know that's rubbish. And also, Blizzard don't tell you to do something or you'll be suspended. If they are going to suspend you, they suspend you and tell you about it. There's no, oh, do this thing, or we're going to suspend you. How is it when you get into a raid with the healers saying, give me wisdom? No, none of our healers argue. The healing officer gets it. No one else has ever argued. Yeah, but it wouldn't be wowaccounthelp.net, would it? It would be www. You know, it'll be Blizzard or Battle.net or World of Warcraft, something like that. You don't make a whole website that's account help. Account help would be a portion of a larger website. GM's never sort of wispy about stuff unless you've written a ticket. Yeah, healers want it, but there's only one getting it, so there's no arguments. Yeah, but what I mean is the actual company is not going to. Blizzard is not going to make an entire website just for account help. Nor is any other company. What do healers want? Wisdom. But as I say, in my guild, they don't argue for it. I mean, apparently, I know someone was saying, I think it might have been Brandips, I can't remember, was saying that in his guild, they have to have an auction for it. Who said this some time ago? You know, there's an open auction for his wisdom. They pay him. I don't get paid. I'll just give it to the healing officer. Yeah, you wouldn't necessarily know it's in a different window, but you would never get a GM whisper you, ever. They don't need to ask you questions to determine whether you're breaking it. If they see you breaking the rules, they will just suspend your account and send you an email saying for how long it's suspended. Is there a DPS officer and tank? There isn't any. No, there isn't. There is a raid leader officer, a healing officer, a recruitment officer, which is me, even though I'm not recruiting at the moment, and 2 other officers without portfolio. I suppose what you should really do is give it to the healer, not the best healer, but give it to the one who will make the best use out of it, which may not be because your best healer may also be your most mana efficient healer as well, in which case they may not need it as much as someone else. But in reality, I give it to our healing officer. Because at the end of the day, if there was any arguments about who should get it, he would decide anyway. So, you know, I'm not interested in any arguments over it. The only thing I have stopped doing, actually, I used to give Blessing of Kings. By default, I would give it to a tank, because why not? And if there was anyone doing any soaking on a fight, I'd probably give it to them. But I now give Blessing of Kings to myself, because the tanks that we've got, like we've got a Brewmaster and a Guardian Druid, and they both change to DPS spec to eat food from the feast, and then back again. The problem is, and I don't know why this is a thing, when you change spec, it removes the greater blessing from you, which means I lose my buff. I don't like losing my buff. So to circumvent the whole problem, I just put Blessing of Kings on myself, because if they keep changing spec, they don't deserve it. No one misses it anyway, because Blessing of Kings is shite. You still get disconnected sometimes when I use slow fall and jump, because the game detects my character as flying hacking. All right. No, I don't think you'd get banned for that. That would just be a bug. Do I think Blizzard could and should do more to educate players how to utilize their character correctly? Maybe they should give more of a shout out to useful guides, because, but in terms of doing it themselves, no. I think Blizzard's attitude, and it's not a bad attitude, is that they support, or they encourage, I should say, they encourage the community to help each other out. That's why they allow add-ons and stuff like that, and logs. But they maybe could give more of a focus on, like, saying, Noxic, yeah, don't use that. And then the guides that are good use that. And so on, maybe. But I suppose from their point of view, they might think that that might mean they'd end up showing favoritism to people. Because some people, remember, there are some people that are useful to them from a community point of view for marketing purposes. So like big streamers and YouTubers, that's why they get, you know, the alpha and beta keys early on, because they're useful for marketing purposes. But let's say you've got someone who doesn't produce very good guides. Blizzard wouldn't necessarily want to say, don't go to those people, because then they're upsetting them from the marketing point of view. I don't know. How is Ret DPS Frontaurus looking? Like, mechanics-wise, it's fine, because as far... I don't know personally, because I've not tested them, but from people who have, they tell me that mechanics-wise, there isn't going to be a massive need for a load of rogues, so we're okay there. And DPS-wise, too strong at the moment. Rets are too strong, and it's simply because they need to switch round the 2-set and the 4-set bonus. If they do that, it's fine. But they're not doing it, and I don't know why. And the problem now is, they're not going to do anything now, are they? Because they're getting ready for BlizzCon, and then next week, they're coming down from BlizzCon, and then maybe the week after, they're gearing up for Antorus. It's like, what the hell? No, I agree there, definitely. It doesn't make sense from a marketing point of view to ever say that a site or a group isn't a good source. Yeah, that's true. That's the problem. But the other problem is, let's say they do as I think maybe they should, but maybe they shouldn't. If they put a spotlight on the ones that are good, by definition, anyone they don't mention is bad, is the implication. Oh, hi, Savos. I remember Incinerate. I may not remember you, though. Apologies. I am very bad with names. I'm guessing you'd be called something else there. Phase 4. Yeah, but I don't... Again, I've heard about this because you keep dying as a mechanic, but I've got a feeling if they haven't already done it, that they will stop the Retribution passive proccing. Because obviously then Rets would be too good. The Noxic guides, it's not just the Ret guide, like the Noxic guides have been known to be terrible for several years now. Right? The problem is, it's only known to be terrible by the people in the know. So the majority of people don't know. I suppose. But it's so awful. Well, the Priest Class Hall mount quest might be amazing, but I don't think the mount itself is. I think, you know, the only one that's worth me maybe at some point doing would be the Shaman one, because I think the Shaman mount looks amazing. I love the Shaman mount. Yeah, Blizzard are known for producing good content, though. They're not going to not test all the stuff. Although that is another thing as well. Like, Antorus is supposed to be... It should hopefully be a lot better than Tomb of Sargeras from a balancing point of view, because they should have learnt to trust their internal testing team more. By their own admission, or by Ian Hazakosta's own admission. The reason why it was so over-tuned was because their internal testing team was beating the content, and they thought, nah, it'll be too easy for Method and Exhaustus then. Failing to appreciate that their own internal testing team, which is something I'd said before then even, because I remember sort of saying to, because people were saying, yo, other people seem to have that attitude as well. I remember a particular video and I had to defend them saying, no, their internal testing team is actually world class. And it is. Of course it bloody is. And, you know, it turns out Ian Hazacostas didn't even appreciate that at the time, but they probably do now. Because, yeah, their balancing for Tomb of Sargeras was based on the notion that their internal testers were not as good as the world's best guilds. The Paladin class mount is a bit boring. They completely missed the opportunity to... Because what's the point of just creating another steed? The steed we got in vanilla looks perfectly good. It's great. So what they should have done was create a Pegasus mount. I've said so for years. Here was their opportunity to do it, and they didn't do it. I don't think it'll be undertuned. I think... Well, I'm not saying it'll be perfect, but I do think Antorus will be better tuned. I think it will be better. No, I don't think it'll be too easy. I really don't think it'll be too easy. Because they don't have... They will still err on the side of slightly too hard than slightly too easy. Because you can always... Just like you don't want to nerf a character, you'd rather undertune them and then buff them than the other way around. You don't want to undertune a fight because, you know, they don't really want to buff fights. As in make fights harder, which they had to do on Mistress Sassine. I mean, they did have to do that. That was a bit of a cock-up on their part as well. Does Blizzard tune around using add-ons and weakers? Of course they do. They have. Yeah, you couldn't do the encounters and Mythic without them in any reasonable amount of time. The people who do it in a reasonable amount of time, no chance of coordinating it without those. So yeah, that's why people talk about mechanics being more complicated now than they used to be. That's because add-ons have got more sophisticated, so they've had to make them more complicated to try and balance it out. They need random people to do it as well. They need a range of people to do beta testing. You know, because what's the point in only getting serious players to test it? Because they will... You might end up with a situation then where 50% of your player base can't even kill the first mob because it's too hard for them. Well, so you need a range of people. You don't have everyone. But obviously, you also need a good number of the people who know what they're talking about as well to provide the meaningful feedback at the end where little differences matter. Will I give a roundup of what I want from BlizzCon? What I would most want them to do, and they won't do, is to announce some changes such that they accept the fact that raiders will subscribe anyway, and not to make us do a load of crapper outside it. Because my biggest issue is, the biggest difficulty there is at the moment from a recruitment point of view and a retention point of view, in every expansion from vanilla all the way up to Warlords of Draenor, you had people, perfectly skillful players, perfectly reliable players, they'd turn up to their raids, they'd have all their consumables, they knew what they were doing, nice people, but they really didn't want to do anything else in the game. They wanted to raid, right? So they would want to log off, they wouldn't want to do anything on an off night, they just would be playing something else or doing something else. Those players have basically been excluded from Legion, because those same players won't have very high artifact level. They won't have all their legendaries. I mean, they might by now, but they wouldn't have got them very quickly, you know. So you're excluding those players from that content. So you end up with a situation where either they don't do it, in which case they're weakening their guild, or they do it and feel burnt out and then quit the game. So they should accept that this content, AP and this legendary system, is for non-raid, for more casual players. And the best way to do that is to introduce a weekly cap on what you can earn from it. And make it so that you can earn everything you need by doing some raiding and some moderate amount of content outside it. Not much, not lots. And let people choose where they want to get it from. Because for Mythic Plus Dungeons, I don't think, for the AP thing, they need to really, like I've said before, they can not have AP from the Mythic Plus Dungeons. Have it in the weekly cache and have it like it is now. The higher the key you do, the more you get. But have that as the only source of AP from Dungeons, and just have Dungeons Award gear as it is now. Because I think people would still do Mythic Plus Dungeons if there were no AP at the end of each one. And you'd have less emphasis on people having to farm them than for the AP. What are my thoughts on such a long beta testing that content creators make so many videos in 9 months, and when the game comes out, it's not even that special? I don't think that's ever been an issue, because I think the people who don't want the spoilers won't watch that content. And people who do aren't experiencing it. So it's still fun when you get in there. Also, the way it is at the start of that 9 months is nowhere near what it's like at the end as well. So, but no, I don't personally see that as an issue. Like, it didn't put me off. I mean, I played that, well, 8 months really in my case, because I was in the second round with the alpha, not the first round. And I even did a crap Christmas poem based on it, wasn't I? Yeah, I remember at the time. I'd only just started the channel. But the, yeah, I didn't get bored of it, because what I was doing was testing and not really playing. Whereas when it came out, then I was playing. It was a different experience, actually. Even though a lot of it wasn't a new experience yet. But I thought it was okay. Give rewards for beta testing. I don't think they should give rewards for beta testing for two reasons. One is that you give rewards out when you can't get people to do it for free. That's what remuneration is. And there's plenty of people who will do it for free. And the other reason is it would then, like, there'll be plenty of people that will want to get into beta and can't. And it's like an extra kick in the teeth to them. It's like, not only can't you get into beta, but you're not getting this mount that we're giving to the people who did get into beta. That just seems a bit unfair to me. But yeah, in terms of you know, beta testing and its effects on people, you know, when the game comes out, if they think they would get jaded by it, then they should just not watch the stuff. Or be selective about what videos they watch. Because they might be able to watch, like content on how classes are performing without spoiling their overall gameplay. Yeah, I mean, so far I've got into every beta that I've wanted to, which is not all of them. So I never even applied to get into the TBC beta. I did with Wrath, and I got in fairly early on. I wasn't actually playing for the Kata one, so that was no. I got into Mop reasonably early, again by chance. I got into WoD fairly early as well, again by chance. And then I got into the Legion one. Sod's Law, I won't get into the next one at all. That's just the way that'll go. Oh, Hearthstone. Oh, yeah, that's right. I remember that. Because when I first applied, because I did actually apply to join the Hearthstone Alpha, because at the beta, sorry, at the time, I wasn't doing a lot. Like, it was a bit of a dry patch of Warcraft, and I didn't get in. And then by the time I did get in, it was nearly out, and also I was actually quite busy in WoW again, so I couldn't be bothered. So I haven't even played Hearthstone to this day. Whereas Heroes of the Storm, I got in quite early on, but then didn't like it, so I didn't play it very much. Thinking more on the lines of PTR test server stuff for like new raids. Again, like I think they have enough people, and again, it's like being a bit unfair to people who are not in guilds that do it or anything like that. You got a WoD beta key from Wowhead. Oh. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. When you don't get a key, you start entering all the competitions where there's giveaways. Because that's, again, another marketing thing. You know, it's like, it's a double whammy for Blizzard. They first of all give keys to the big streamers. And then what they do to make sure that they maximize their views, they also a bit later give beta keys out to give away in their streams, which means that not only is that streamer giving them free marketing effectively, they help maximize the number of views they've got on the stream by giving them a giveaway, you know, in the form of a beta key. There were dry patches in Warcraft before WoD, though. Like, the first big one that I mean, I wasn't there at the end of Wrath. People talk about a content drought there. Looking at the dates, I'd be surprised if you can really call that a content drought in the way that we've seen them since. I mean, it wasn't, all right, you know, it might have been more of a one than it was in TBT or Vanilla, but, you know. Cataclysm was a big one. And then Mop was a big one. And then WoD was a big one. So, yeah. But Legion shouldn't be... I mean, Legion, there will still have to be one, and I just hope that people are fair about it, because there has to come a point at which you can't bring out a lot of substantial content, because you need people to be able to do it before the new expansion comes out. And also, you'll also want your more serious players doing your testing for you as well. No, yeah, I think that's probably what it is. I still haven't done Ruby Sanctum to this day, of course, because there's not been any point. It's the only raid I've never been in. I mean, there's several raids I haven't progressed on, because I say I quit WoW for a while. But Ruby Sanctum I've never even been in, so I have no idea even what's in there. I'm sort of guessing a dragon, but I don't actually know. A 2-boss raid. Well, I mean, we'll get we'll get a smallish raid. I think more than 2 bosses. I think 3 or 4 would be more likely. It was basically Trilliax and Desolate House combined, was it? Yeah. Right. I mean, I don't know. I've never actually been there. Sometimes I've thought, maybe I'll just go there and have a look. But then I think, well, what's the point? There's no transmog there. I've had a look at the gear it drops. None of it looks any good for transmog purposes. Well, I mean, one thing that WoD was sort of good for was leveling alts, because there wasn't a lot else to do. Do I think there'll ever be a day of accelerated level? There already is. It's called Heirlooms. I mean, the thing is, if they do start to expand their online store, then one obvious thing they could put in it is experience scrolls. Because like you have experience elixirs that last up until a particular level. They could always add some of those to the online store. I think they have that in Asia, don't they? Experience scrolls won't work since they have the boost. They have one boost, or you pay for the other one. What's wrong with experience scrolls? If you want alts, that's the way to do it. That's an accelerated XP boost for which they can make some money. It's the character boost they shouldn't really have. I don't mind them giving one with each expansion on each account. Why can't archaeologists or alchemists make experience scrolls or pots? Because how's Blizzard supposed to make money out of that? I'm not saying they should be expensive, these things. Yeah, the full character boost does cost a lot. But you could bring out experience scrolls that wouldn't have to be that expensive. You know, maybe you pay £5 for 10 of them or something like that. And each one lasts a couple of hours. You know, that would be all right. You wouldn't have to use it all the time. You could just use it when you know you're going to be going into an intense period of questing or something, or dungeons. Well, there's any number of things. I mean, one thing that's quite certain is that as soon as someone cottons onto the idea that money can be made on the online store at Blizzard, and it's baffled me that they still haven't worked it out, then that is what will happen. Things like this will happen whether you like it or not. And I'd far rather it, you know, you were able to buy things that just, I mean, who really cares about accelerated leveling? It doesn't really affect anyone. Because you don't have to have alts. So I'd much rather it was on stuff like that than anything that, yeah, like legendary tokens. That would be a bad thing. Well, they could always limit it. They could limit it so that the experience scrolls allowed you to boost up to the previous level cap. If that was a thing, if that was necessary. Guild Wars 2, you get birthday rewards every year of your character life. I see. Right, I see. That's interesting. They did actually, didn't they? Hold on. This was in WoD. Was it for the 10th anniversary? It was, wasn't it? For the 10th anniversary, they gave everyone who had subscribed constantly since the game came out a free model, didn't they? They sent them. See, the GM of the guild I was in at the time got one. But I think that's the only time they've ever done anything like that. They're not going to allow anything that can be put on the online store to make money with. It makes no sense at all to let people just craft it. Yeah, but not everyone has heirlooms. Yeah. Was it less than 100? I didn't know how many it was. I mean, the thing is, like, I think they should change the leveling process because it's very off-putting for new players. But that assumes that they care about the effect on new players. Like when I was discussing this before, quite a while ago, someone was suggesting that Blizzard are focused on retaining rather than getting new players. Although I don't think they're doing a very good job of retaining players. Because burning people out on the game is not a good way to retain players. Heirlooms 4k gold to get a full set? No, it costs several thousand gold just to get the things to you've got to upgrade them several times as well. Those things aren't cheap. It is very off-putting, the number of levels that there are. Just the number is off-putting. It's what's putting me off doing this. I am going to do this beginner's guide series at some point, but the main thing putting it off, quite frankly, is the fact that I've got to spend time leveling a character. You can bet your ass I'm not going to level it all the way. I'm going to level it to do all the bits I need to for the leveling purposes. Then I'm going to boost it. Not messing about. Maybe make the base vanilla game free to play. Well, it's already free to play for the first 20 levels, isn't it? I don't think a stat squish. I'm not saying definitely not. Because I'm pretty sure the last time Blizzard were asked about it, they had the attitude that if the game can handle the large numbers, which apparently it can now, all you need to do is keep adding suffixes to the end of it. So, you know, K's and M's and what have you. They'll just add another suffix to the end of it and keep the same number of significant figures. I mean, I think there shouldn't. I think more important than a stat squish would be a level squish. I would like to see a level squish. So for the next expansion, you know how they usually say, oh, we're adding 10 new levels or 5 new levels or something like that. I think it should say, we're taking 50 levels off you. How do you like them apples? The new big feature. I would clap that. Gear with 1,000,000 stamina. Yeah. I would like to see all zone scale as well. Some people have different views on that. We don't need to imagine it. We saw it a couple of years ago. We saw people running around when they did that special LFR version of Molten Core that everyone messed up. All those people who are going, oh, Molten Core is so easy then. And all these people who didn't do it, so they didn't know the mechanics, and kept failing on it. I had to tell them what to do. Yes, it is. Yeah, you're trying to get someone into the game, and you're trying to tell them all about the game, and what you'll tell them is all the end game. Oh, that sounds great. And then you've got to tell them, but by the way, before you can do all this, you've got to get yourself up to level 110. It's like, what? You're pretty sure the artifact level thing was a test for remover of character levels. That might be reading a lot into it. We will see. But that's what I would like them to announce a level squish. That's what I would like. Because I think it's too much. And also, I think for the long-term health of an MMO, you need to just have a set level cap. Now, ordinarily, I would think it's not really workable, but it sort of is. I'm not saying Elder Scrolls Online does it perfectly, because the problem is the champion point system is also something that can get out of hand. But at least you've got this, at least that's account wide. I quite like the idea of 2 types of level. One, which you've got to get up to, and you do that on any character you roll. And then the second one is account wide. That sounds like a much better idea to me. You pretty much stick to dungeons until you hit mob. It's a bit boring. There are, I mean, what I do when I'm leveling a character, when I'm high enough level to do dungeons, I usually boost them through on someone else. So, on like another character. So I only do the dungeons for the quest really. And there are some levels where you do run out of dungeons to do. The veteran levels were appalling with the SOE. That was a dreadful idea. They should never have done that. But since then, the system is much better. But I don't really know about Diablo 3. But if that's account wide, then yes. It would be like Paragon levels if that's what that is. Yeah, I have to be 15 to do dungeons. Yeah, I know. People have said this before, Greymane. Scale it, but with the content that was current idea. Again, I think they should just scale it all. Just scale it. I accept that they wouldn't necessarily have to. They could do it in 2 lumps. You could have all the previous expansions content all scaled up to the previous level cap. Then have the new zones scale up to the new level cap to force you to do the new zones. If they want you to do the new zones for storyline purposes, then sure, incentivize that in some way. But like, okay, again, join comparison with Elder Scrolls Online. When you roll a new character in Elder Scrolls Online, you don't start off in the starting area. It's actually quite annoying. I'd like to start off in the starting area, so I always go back there. Where you start off is in the new zone, the new area with the new expansion. That's where you start off. So it would be the equivalent in World of Warcraft of a level 1 character starting off on the Broken Shore, say. Or Dalaran, about to go and do your quests to get your artifact weapon. So Diablo 3, once you hit the max level of 70, all your XP goes to Paragon levels, which give you extra things like artifact levels. But when you create a new character, you'll have all the Paragon levels at level 1. Oh, I see. In that case, yes, it is the same. Yeah, that is the sort of thing I would do. Now, I don't mind if you have to get that character to the level cap before they get the benefit of those Paragon levels. That's fine with me. But, you know, just to have that situation, it sounds a lot better to me. Yes, you can. Yeah, that's what I do. When I roll a new character on ESO, I don't even get the boat. I just get I go to the way shrine and teleport back to the starting area that I want to start at. Yeah, yeah, that's the sort of thing I'm meaning. They'd never give us such account-wide power, wouldn't they? Why not? They did in Diablo, and there's been plenty. I mean, people were calling Legion World of Diablo at the start. There was so much put into it. I mean, again, I've got Diablo 3. I've sort of played it through a little bit, but I don't really know about lots of the end game features. There were so many features put into World of Warcraft that were directly taken from Diablo that, are you really going to rule out another Diablo feature being put into World of Warcraft? I'm not sure I would. But anyway, we've sort of overshot the end by about 50 minutes. I'll give it another few minutes for people just to finish off anything they want to talk about. But then I actually have got to do a video tonight as well. So I'm going to sort of get on with that as well. So AP, or even Artifact Knowledge, wasn't account-wide for almost a year. Well, AP still isn't. Artifact Knowledge, I mean, it's not so much that Artifact Knowledge is account-wide, so much as the fact... Because it sort of was, wasn't it? Because you could buy those tomes. But yeah, it's... I mean, at the moment, it's just any characters get that automatically, which is a better system. But that's something they've improved about it. There are things they've actually improved to give Blizzard their due. I mean, I only get annoyed because sometimes, you know, although you sort of praise them for the improvements they've made, some of the improvements were for problems that should have been seen a mile off. Some of them, fair enough, were not obvious, but there's enough of them that were obvious that you have to wonder what's going on. Yeah, okay, yeah, I will get off going now. I'm off. See you later. Bye-bye. Definitely gone.